We're live.
We're live! Hello, everybody. Welcome to CATECHESIS. Sorry. Welcome to Quantum Catechesis. I'm Father Joe Krupp, and you are not. And I've had way too much caffeine, so this could get interesting.
That's good.
I was just talking about how, like, if you're my age or around my age, remember, like, in the 80s, seriously, there would always be, right around Christmas time, these commercials where they would name some person you've never heard of. Like, so-and-so sings the Christmas classics. And it would always be like a fireplace, and if it was a guy, they'd have the sweater that was tied up in front, and they would be, do you remember this? Oh, Tannenbaum. And they always had, like, this incredibly schmaltzy, like, manner. And they were never people you heard of. Like, I remember the Connie Francis one. Do you remember the Connie Francis? Never on a Sunday, a Sunday, a Sunday. Do you remember this?
Yes.
I have no idea why we're talking about this.
What I remember
Yes.
is at Christmas time, they always had commercials selling you, like, the Ginsu knife.
Oh, yeah. Ginsu was the thing. Whoever owned Ginsu, and maybe it was like Bobby Ginsu, made some cheese. Like, in the 50s and 60s, it was Acme. And then in the 70s and 80s, it was Ginsu. Their name was on everything. And I don't know who they are. Like, it could be now they're DuPont.
Right.
Like, it turns out they just got huge. How? By selling crappy knives at a discount. So I'm so happy to be here with you. And I'm kind of digging where we're going with the show. Because one of the most common sets of questions I get around Christmas is about what would appear to be a very confusing narrative of Jesus' birth. Right? We all get the basics. But the way people wrote stories back then is different than us. So what I'm going to do is first show you my new coffee cup. Can God's people see this?
Yeah, they can.
Okay, can you guys see this?
It's too close.
It's too close. How about now? And look, there's my eyebrows. Okay, can now they see it?
They can see it.
Are there even people watching? Or have you all given up on me?
No.
Okay, I would actually respect your judgment if you were all like, Father, we're kind of done now. You need to go away. Or just talk by yourself in a room for an hour every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So, side note, by the way, or not really side note, but next week, remember I said this week we're only doing Wednesday, and of course I assume you get that. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and we're kind of busy that day. Today is Christmas Adam. I just came up with that. I feel pretty saucy about it. Okay, so today is Christmas Adam, tomorrow's Christmas Eve. And that's kind of a busy day for us priests. It's not at all the busiest. If you want to ever, like, drive a priest to the point where he might jump out a window, call him Holy Week and ask a weird question. I had that happen like 4 years ago. Someone who, it was so hilarious, they called Holy Week and were like, there was a problem with this week's bulletin. And I was like, cool, just tell me where you're at so I can come kill you. So, I'm kidding. I didn't say that. I knew exactly where he was at. So, what were we talking about? Do you remember? Oh, next week, I said we're just going to do Wednesday. You know what? If you guys are up for it, and I mean this, don't say yes unless you're going to watch, all right? We can do a Thursday show next week. We can. No problem. I just don't know if is that New Year's Eve?
Yeah.
I just don't know if on New Year's Eve, like, you probably have better things to do.
We're still quarantining.
We are still quarantined.
So I think it'd be good.
Yeah, okay. So if you all want, let us know, right? And I'm not looking for gratuitous praise. Truly. This is literally, do you have any interest in me doing a show next Thursday? And if so, I'm happy to. I think it'll be a riot, right? Carrie will probably be drunk again. So, yeah.
It's supposed to be.
Why would that day be any different than all the others? Hey, want to hear a cool thing about Joe and Black Beer? Today.
Yes.
Do you know about this?
Yes.
Today! They have a pop-up of me at Lansing Brewery. Like, there's a cutout of me. Is it 6 foot tall?
Yes.
6'1"? I'm 6'1".
So a pop-up is different.
Is the event.
Yes.
Right. The pop-up event is gonna, they have a cutout of me. And they were gonna do it life size, but they only went life height because they ran out of cardboard when they got to my belly. They were like, Joe, we only had 3 tons. And the gal working the chainsaw / scissors, she lost feeling in both arms. And by the way, she's a logger. So anyway, there will be an actual height, though not girth, cut out of me. This is so weird. I don't know what it means that there's a cutout of me. I think the next step, I'm going to be candid. All right? I think next step is a bobblehead. If there's a bobblehead Father Joe someday, I'll retire.
You'll know you made it.
I'll know.
That would really be appropriate.
I think so. I would be the Ted Williams or the Ichiro. I would be the Ichiro of something. So anyway, if you want, stop by Lansing Brewing today. They're selling my beer. They're having discounts on the merchandise. And there's a cardboard cutout of me. The cartoon me, right? Not like this ugly thing, but I mean like the artist rendering. So anyone, you can stop by and get your picture with this cutout. I might do it. I won't. I'm busy. Crap. Okay. So if you do this, if you are messed up enough to go out to Lansing Brewing and get a picture of you with my cartoon cut out, we would love it if you would post those pictures on Holy Church of the Holy Family Facebook page or mine.
Yes.
Probably Church of the Holy Family. And if you want to put it on Twitter, just tag me, please.
Yes.
And if you don't tag me, I will find you and I will kill you. I can't do Liam Neeson. I can't. I don't know if Liam Neeson can do Liam Neeson. So anyway, here we are. Fat and happy little people. Do we have enough people for me to start?
Yeah.
People are arriving?
Yes.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to do this motion, and you're going to respect it. Second, I'm going to walk you through the chronology of Jesus' birth. Right? Why? Because I'm in charge. It was this or talk about how much I love the Tigers. So, what do we need to know for this to maybe make a little more sense? You got to remember, and I know this sounds funny, but this is a literal issue, okay? Writing something back then was a big deal. It was hard to do. Paper was expensive. Writing took a long time. And frankly, humans didn't have a ton of free time. And I know that sounds funny, but it's true. You went, when it was night, you went to bed. When it was morning, you woke up. And in between, you worked and you ate. So the writing down of things was a big deal. And so a lot gets skipped. Why does it get skipped? Because of what we call assumed knowledge. Okay? So the only thing I could think of as an example, and this is probably a stupid example, and I'm sure there's a better one. But as if I said to you, hey, after this, I'm going to the Secretary of State's office. Or in your state, it might be the DMV. And I can write that. And you know what I mean. I'm about to get in a line. And I'm about to go toe-to-toe with a bureaucracy. And it wouldn't be like you read, or you hear, he's going to the Secretary of State. Gosh, that's great. Or if I said to you, how do I feel? I feel like I got to go to the Secretary of State. See, isn't this a stupid example? But you would know what I mean. It's assumed knowledge. Or, Joe, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm going to take Dad and go watch the Tigers. Now, if someone read that 1,000 years from now in a country that doesn't even exist at this point, they don't know really what that means. He's going to go to the zoo? Or no, he's going to watch baseball. It's baseball, right? There's so much that you and I don't say because we know. And the example, I think I just used this recently with you. Again, if you've seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, think of this. When they show Jesus being tortured and executed, that's only about 3 lines in Scripture. But it's a 2 and some hour movie. Why? Because people knew what they were talking about. People knew when they said Jesus was scourged. Like sometimes you see these almost neat little things with a little belt, and no, Romans use something called a cat o' nine tails. And if you saw the movie, you saw what that is. To get scourged was a death sentence. And it took all day. They would have to stop scourging you, to wrap you up and put clotting agents in you to try to clot the blood so that they could do it again, right? There's so much you and I communicate to each other with assumed knowledge, and rightly so, but so did they. So isn't weird, does my head look really huge on this picture? It's kind of funny. I can see a little image of me today right above it, and I'm a little distracted by my gargantuan melon. It's like Sputnik. It's spherical, but pointy at parts. Maybe it's the way, like if I do this, it definitely looks like that. Did you see that? Look.
It's out of focus there.
All right. What are we talking about? Do you remember? Oh, assumed knowledge. So assumed knowledge is a factor here, and we're going to talk about how that affects it directly in some specific ways. The second thing that affects it is people simply told stories differently back then. Okay? You and I are probably fully westernized. Namely, if I go to communicate a story to you, and I'm not telling you exactly what happened as I can and how it happened, that moves it to us, for us, from a category of truth to fiction, right? For them, assumed knowledge meant so much, and space limitations meant so much, that it wasn't uncommon that they simply told you the story in a way that will make sense to you. They told the truth, but they weren't hyper-focused on, we always cover who, what, where, when, why, how. They cover who and why. Right? I think early on in the show I gave you this example, and I'm going to give it to you again because it's really important. When I was in Israel the first time, we were taking a class, and it was taught by a Jew. And he was explaining to us, you guys talk different. You think different. It's a different worldview. And as an example, he talked about how when he went to see a bunch of American kids, there was a school there for Americans, right? And so he had a bunch of little American squeakers. And he says, I go in there and I say, hey kids, guess what? I got a new car. He said, every American kid, their hand is up, right? And the questions start. And what are the questions? Well, what color is it? What kind is it? Right? And what are the questions? What color is it? What kind is it? Did you get a good deal? Right? All these 4 doors, 2 doors, blah, blah, blah. And he's happy to answer all of them. It's the same day. I go right down the hill and I hit a Hebraic school. And so it's all these little beautiful Jewish boys and girls. And he tells them the same thing. Hey, I got a new car. And they're kids, so every hand goes up. First question, yes. Do you like it? And he said, when I said yes, they had no more questions. That's all they wanted to know. Do you like it? Yeah. Oh, good. Color? Kind? Deal? Sure. But the important thing to the little Jewish boys and girls was the relationship. Do you like it? Americans wanted details about the car. The other kids wanted details about the relationship. And I'm not doing that thing people do where see how much better they are than us. No, both are valid and both are groovy. Both are just expressions of cultural conditioning, okay? But remember that when we tell this story, you and I are very used to thinking it a certain way. Now, what I don't want to do is what this one priest did when I was a kid. He just loved to get up and kind of smash your images. For no other reason than, do you remember this? He always thought it was cool. And he wasn't always telling us accurate information anyway. I learned as I got older. Like, this is one he always said, the Jesus, the picture of Mary on a donkey. And she's got little squeaky Jesus, and Joseph is leading her on a donkey, right? And he was so contemptuous. Oh, that's not how it happened. She would have been leading the donkey, and he would have been sitting on it. And remember this? He used to just love to fill his homilies with these things. And I found out, and I always carried that. I thought, okay, that's not true at all. Not in that culture, not at all, right? But anyway, so I don't want to do that. I just want to help us maybe see, okay, what's the order? Why? Because Matthew tells the story and Luke tells the story, and they don't always match up in terms of timeline. Why? Because one was aware of the other, and they didn't need to give you information you didn't need. You'll see that John did this a lot. John was the last gospel written, so he doesn't write the infancy narrative at all. Why? Because two people already did. And most of John's gospel, I don't know if this is fair to say most, let's say a lot, some, he's clarifying for you what the others didn't tell. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very similar. John stands alone. Why? John's was about 20 years after the last of the three, and so he filled in for you details the others didn't. Am I making sense?
Yes.
You promise?
Yes.
Okay. So, with that, I want to do that today. Every time I want to throw in a with that. Let's take a peek at how this went down, homie. See, I'm cool with the hip lingo. So first, the Archangel Gabriel, which in his name means the power of God, right? Carrie's touching my face. On camera. Not like this. See, now I'm touching my face. But Carrie why did you touch the camera?
Just to focus.
Just to focus. It doesn't help me focus, and that's the problem. So, cough. Gabriel, Archangel. We know there's 7, and we know the names of 4, right? Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Lucifer. The Lucifer thing didn't work out. But when you talk about archangels, you are talking about, I believe, the most powerful created things in the universe, right? Jesus isn't created. Jesus is existence. But when you get to things God made, I believe it's accurate to say that the archangels are the most powerful created things. And this is just a groovy little note that I've mentioned to our tribe a few times here. When the Archangel Gabriel, and what does Gabriel mean? The strength of God. Okay, God's strength. He appears to our mother, Luke 1:5, and says to her, Ave, right? And I think I've talked to you about this. Have I talked to them about this? In Latin, when you want to say hello, like if I say hello to you guys, I say salve, because that's what you say to your equals, right? Hey, salve, salve, right? That's basically hello, hi. Okay. Ave is what you and I would say to the Pope or royalty or Ichiro Suzuki. The most powerful created thing in the universe appeared to a 13 to 15-year-old girl and said to her, Ave, right? Gave her the how you doing. And obviously she was scared. Every time an angel pops into someone, they have to, what's the first thing they always have to say? Don't be afraid. Because while we show angels as either very cute or lovely, they must be terrifying. Right? And if you read, I believe, Ezekiel describing them, if you read the book of Revelations describing them, they are not what you and I would think of when we think of angels. We think of very cute, maybe cuddly. Nope, angels are terrifying. And the first thing they always have to say, except to the people they're there to kill, which happened a few times, more than a few times, is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So Mary, oh no, I said this backward. First Gabriel appears to Zechariah, John the Baptist's dad. Okay, and tells him that he's gonna, his wife is gonna give birth to John the Baptist. So Zechariah then goes home to Judea, and his wife Elizabeth becomes pregnant. Okay, and inside Elizabeth now is John the Baptist. Okay, John the Baptist, in case you're wondering, formed a church, the First Baptist Church. Okay, I'm going to be totally honest, I made that up. I remember when I was a kid, one time we passed a church and it said First Baptist, and my dad said, well, that's the second one I've seen like that. It took us a while to figure out what that means. So, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, Gabriel appears this time to Mary. That's where the Ave thing goes down. Sorry about that, folk. And tells her, this is Luke 1:26, that she is going to give birth to the Son of God. Now, I don't know. I may regret telling people this. I don't know. I know when I taught it at Bible study, reading the footnotes from the Bible, the Catholic Bible, our deacon freaked out and told everyone what I said was heresy. But I was curious in seminary, okay? So when the angel says you're going to conceive in your womb and bear a son, you'll name him Jesus, where did the DNA come from? It can't be all Mary's DNA, because then it would be Mary, right? And so this one, I believe it's this one, I should double check. This Bible is like, no, it was Joseph's DNA, right? That God did a mystical thing and put Joseph's DNA in there. And that's the one where the deacon afterward, turns out I freaked him out. And told everyone what he said was heresy. The DNA had to come from somewhere. And Mary was a virgin. They didn't have sex. So the understanding, and again, best guess, how do you figure this out? The best guess, God took Joseph's DNA and put it into this baby, right? Let me find it. Well, anyway, who cares, right? Minor point. So, just as a side note, that was always a sticking point for me, because it can't be all Mary's DNA, because then it would be Mary, right? So, Mary conceives in her womb mystically and carries within her God. Now, this is why, for our non-Catholic brothers and sisters, I think most of you get this, I think this is why we don't think we can honor Mary enough. We don't worship her. We know she's human, but she's the best human. St. Bonaventure, I think it was him, said, Mary is the solitary boast of our messed up human race. She's the only bragging point we got. She's our MVP. Okay? We believe that because she said yes to God, God fundamentally changed her. Okay? And as a result of that, she could do something no other human could. Hold God in her womb. And I could go on that topic, but I won't because time's short-ish. So Mary responds to this joyful news by going and staying with Elizabeth for 3 months before getting back home to Nazareth. We think this is happening. If you do the math, it looks like she stayed there till John was born. Okay, because if you do the math, she stayed there until Elizabeth's 9th month. Okay? Elizabeth gives birth at the end of that 9 months, but before the 10. And why is it so vague? They didn't do time like us. And never forget, I think I've explained this too many times, but they always get their dates muddled when it comes to us. Why? Because they didn't understand leap year. Okay? So you know how it is. It's not, 360 some days. How many are there?
They didn't have a calendar.
They had a kind of calendar.
Okay.
But what they didn't get, like I think I told you about this, Romans wrote about this. Not Romans in the Bible, but the Romans. Julius Caesar was one of the people who really made an effort to fix it. All they knew is that and I'm making this up, 30 years? I don't know what it was. They would find themselves planting crops in November. And they'd go, huh. Right? And they would literally go, it's April. I'm dead set right. Who cares? It's not like they had Palm Pilots. Does anyone have Palm Pilots anymore?
I don't know.
I liked mine. Did you have a Palm Pilot?
I did.
Do you know what to me was the greatest was the BlackBerry with the pushy buttons. I wish I had pushy
You could
buttons.
feel them.
Yes. Anyway. So it's just, people's concept of time wasn't the same as ours because in the best way possible, they didn't give a rip. You got where you needed to go when you could get there. It wasn't the wedding will be at 9 o'clock on Saturday. It was the wedding's going to be this week. Why? Well, you wait till everybody gets there. It's going to take some people long, and you couldn't call ahead. Charlie, we're behind. We're out of gas, and the tire's flat. Oh my gosh. I don't know what that was. People were loose about time because time didn't matter that much. So you end up with these curious things. Well, John was born in the 10th month. Kinda. Who knows? That's how, if you do the math, that's what appears to have happened. But again, they wouldn't have cared so much about telling you this was his birth. Okay. Am I going into too much detail?
Oh, I
All
know.
right. So at the Elizabeth gives birth to John the Baptist. Then John is circumcised. That was this morning's reading, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. That's Luke 1:57. Okay. And yeah, okay. I think that's good enough. Now, sometime between the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy and Joseph and Mary moving in together is when Joseph was informed that Mary is pregnant and that he plans to divorce her quietly. Now, this is a little bit weird for us, but stick with me. When we say they were living together, I don't know how to explain this. People lived together before they were married on the assumption, and when I say assumption, I should say the mandate. So if I was promised to Sue, which is how it worked out, it's not like you picked your bride, right? Or your bride certainly didn't pick you. Sorry, ladies. You move in together while you wait for the marriage process to happen. Okay? And it wasn't living in sin. It was the idea. This is just how things worked back then. But you certainly didn't have sex before then. Okay? And again, I don't think we need to get into it. Just know they worked it differently. At some point, Joseph finds out that Mary's pregnant and intends on divorcing her. Why? Well, it's not my kid. And why does it say divorce her quietly? Because then he could do it without shaming her. He could simply be saying, and forgive me, ladies, again, I know this is awful, okay, but this was how it was back then. He could simply go out and divorce her and leave everyone with the impression that he just didn't like her, so he broke it off, and that she's carrying his kid. Right? And I know when I was a kid, I was told, well, her life was in danger. I'm learning that really wasn't true. Her life was in danger in the sense of not having a man to take care of her and her baby, but not from the idea of her getting executed. Yeah. No? Does that make sense? What people would just assume, and again, I'm so sorry for this, okay, is that Joseph slept with her, got her pregnant, and decided he didn't want to marry her. So he divorced her. And back then, a man could divorce a woman literally for burning bread. He could just say, we're divorced, and frankly, she's hosed. Right? Women couldn't work for a living except in prostitution, frankly. This was not a female-friendly society. So he makes this decision. I'm going to divorce her quietly. I'm not going to shame her. And oddly enough, he'll take some of the shame himself. For the rest of his life, people would assume that's his kid, and he just didn't want him. Okay? But an angel appears to him, and the angel's name, do you know this one? Behold. Behold, the angel of the Lord. And maybe you know his cousin Lo. The angel appeared to him in a dream and told him to go ahead with the marriage. This probably occurred after Mary came back from visiting Elizabeth. And he would probably have waited to deal with divorce until Mary's pregnancy was obvious. So what does he do? How do we figure this? Again, we're just guessing, best guess as to when Joseph found out and when he dealt with it. It probably was when Mary came back, because otherwise he's just relying on gossip. Mary's pregnant. You know, if any of you are from a small town, you know what I'm talking about. So then in Matthew 1:24, Joseph and Mary move in together. She's pregnant with Joseph's child in a sense, but God's child by divine will. And this would have all been happening in Nazareth. So then Caesar Augustus, my favorite Roman emperor. And when I say favorite, I don't mean like he was a good guy. Okay. He calls a census. Why do you call a census if you're a Roman? Well, you see how much tax you can stretch out of people, right? The old Roman saw back then was the goal is to fleece the sheep, not kill it, right? You take as much as you can, but ensure that they're able to make more for you next year too. Okay, I should walk you through. Do you guys want to hear Roman taxation policy? This is nuts. I don't know. Do they?
Yes.
Really? Okay. So there were numerous taxes you paid as a human under Roman occupation. You had religious taxes and secular taxes. Secular taxes were voluntary in this sense. If you didn't want to get killed, you paid them. If you were comfortable getting killed, you did not have to pay them. Religious taxes were pretty awful too, and you had to pay them if you wanted to worship. Okay, it was kind of a crappy thing. But this was a census tax. This was a tax you simply paid for existing. Okay, but there were other taxes, and Romans really had weird. It's crazy in retrospect what the Romans knew and what they couldn't figure out. And this is crazy. They never figured out inflation. They never figured. All they knew is every once in a while their money became worthless, and they really never knew how to deal with it. A guy named Diocletian came up with a really convoluted way, but we won't get into that. Anyway, so basically the way it worked is, well, I can't draw, but just picture the Roman Empire as a big old circle on a map, right? And I know it wasn't. It was more like a, what do you call that, an oval? A long, fat circle? Fat, short circle? Fat and short. Like me. I always think that when I baptize a kid, I'm like, this baby is short and fat and bald. And I'm getting there. Like, I'm going to get shorter. I don't know if I'm going to get fatter, I just assume. And I ain't getting, it's not like this is going to happen again. I've never heard of hair rallying. Right. It seems committed to my ears. It's like all the hair that should be on my head, it's like, no, his ears need that. And I have one of those little fingers, and it sounds like a chainsaw. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on in there?
Does it hurt?
No.
Does it hurt?
No, but it gets rid of it. Like, here. Who knows? What was God thinking?
Right?
Right? As men get older, they need more hair in their ears. All right, Lord, I'm going to trust you on this one.
God needs a laugh too.
Yeah. What were we talking about? So here, one thing they did was taxes. They did a lot of them. Census tax was the tax just to exist. And it also gave the Romans a good sense of how many men were about. Okay? Because men in occupied territory were potential issues, right? But they were also money makers. They just wanted to have a sense of this. And the way they did taxes beyond census is really crazy. So again, picture the empire as a circle. That's how I got to hair in my ears. Yes. Okay. And then what the Roman Emperor Caesar might say, okay, I need, and I'm making this up, 10 million in taxes. Okay, great. So now I come forward and I say, all right, I'll give you $10 million. I'll pay everyone's taxes for the right to collect 12 million in taxes. Caesar says, well, yes, that's a great idea. So now I have the right to collect $12 million from the Roman Empire by whatever means is considered reasonable. So then Carrie comes to me and my dad, and they say, Joe, give us the right to collect $14 million. We'll divide Rome in half. And Carrie will collect 14 and Dad will collect, or Carrie will collect 7, Dad will collect 7. And I say, sure. So now I got my money back plus a little ayuda. Okay? Then Carrie will do the same. She'll take her chunk, that's $7 million, and she'll sell it to 2 people and say, you get the right to collect $10 million. And so the tax starts off reasonable, but by the time it filters all the way through the system and gets to you in Bethlehem, you're paying a lot more than you should. Does that make sense? Oh, good. I've never explained it that well. You're welcome. See, that's my gazing heavenward.
Yes.
Okay. So why am I telling? Oh, just because it's interesting, I guess. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to live at this time. This was one of the worst times in human history to live. Right? Truly. One of the most violent and awful times in human history to live. And people might think, oh, now it's worse. Oh, no. This is, do you know you live in, statistically, factually, the least violent time in human history?
Really?
By far. By far. That's not debatable. That's not subjective. This is literally, if you're talking life expectancy, if you're talking about the possibility of dying by violence, there's never been a better time to be a human. Isn't that crazy? So, what were we? I guess I just went through it because that's kind of cool to me. Yeah. Okay. So, Caesar Augustus announces an enrollment, namely, he's trying to figure out how much census tax he gets to levy, and they have to travel to Jerusalem. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Okay? Of course, Jesus in the womb, right? So, Mary was probably in the 3rd trimester at the time of the enrollment, and Joseph must have owned property somewhere in Bethlehem because they lived in Nazareth. But he had to go back to Bethlehem, which tells us a couple things. One, he's considered genetically descended from David. Okay, he has some biological connection to King David. And the second thing, he probably owned some property there. Right? I know we're used to thinking of Joseph as poor, and by our standards, he would be ludicrously poor. But a carpenter had an okay, comfortable living. Right? They had good jobs and good work, and probably did okay for himself. Again, by our standards, oh my gosh, no. So while there, they probably stayed with relatives. That's what you did. But they stayed in a barn. Okay? And again, I know we think of that as awful, and I get it, but that was pretty normal. And even in European history, heck, in American history, until 100, 150 years ago, that was normal. When you went to someone's house, you crashed at their barn. It was warm. If you've ever been on a farm at night, those animals are warm. And people tended, believe it or not, where they could, to even move their animals into the house at night in winter to keep them warm and to keep the animals safe. Jesus being born in a barn is not as awful as we think or uncommon as we think, and it's not cute though either, right? That's always the danger, and to some extent, of Christmas is look how cute baby Jesus is. Yeah, his life's in imminent danger. He's surrounded by cow poo, and yikes, okay? So Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This is Luke 2:7 and Matthew 1:24. Okay, we know he was born in Bethlehem. And then that night, it says in Luke, the shepherds visited them. Shepherds were an interesting class of human. Okay, people wouldn't have been, I don't know, an honor-crazed society, which this was. Being a shepherd was not honorable. It wasn't that you were bad. It was just considered, that's a crappy job. And I don't want to say what the equivalent of it today would be because A, I don't know, and B, someone will get offended. Right? But whatever it is, it's not a job where if you wouldn't go to school and say, my dad's a shepherd. I thought that was a great face I just made, no?
Yes.
Okay. I love that that's who the angels came to. They didn't go to a palace. They didn't go to a rich person's house. They didn't go to the righteous people's house. They went to the shepherds, the smelly, violent shepherds were, I guess, to some extent, it would be the way we talk about sailors now. But we like their toughness, their coarseness. This culture didn't, right? It would have been like, these are just tough, scary, smelly, drunk dudes, okay? And again, we would look at that and say, sweet, that culture didn't. Okay? So the shepherds come and they worship Jesus. And right around this time, Matthew 2:2, I love saying that, Matthew 2:2. Magi in the east saw an unusual constellation. Tons of theories about what they saw, and I can never keep them all straight. I do believe it was the convergence of Venus and Mars, I think. Why? Mars was the god of war, the red planet, right? When you see, in fact, Dad and I just, Monday, we went out and we're stargazing, and Mars is just as red as it can be. Do people know about this? Have I talked about Mars?
No.
Okay, so why was Mars important? Mars was one of the favored gods of the Romans. The Germans worshipped him too, but they called him something else. The Northmen worshipped him, and they called him, began with an I. I can't remember. No, began with, Tiers. They called him Tiers. Tiers, I think. It's where we get Tuesday, right? And why was Mars important? Because he was called the god of war. Why? Because he was soaked in blood. He was the only planet that looked red. And when did he always appear in the Roman sky? During war season, right? They have war season. You planted, I know this is crazy, then you fought, and then you quit fighting for harvest. That's how you did it, right? Because you had to eat. During war season, Mars would appear in the Roman sky, and he appeared bright red during war season, so they assumed god of war. And you get all kinds of interesting things from there. This is where Marius is named for, right? Marius means of Mars, right? Martial is from Mars. Martial meaning military, fighting, war. All of these words come from Mars. He was the god of war, and they loved him, right? Romans would gather to go to war on what was called, I swear, the field of Mars. And then they weren't really shouters, right? Like Germans wrote about this. When the Romans and Germans would fight, the Germans would scream and get themselves in a fervor, and the Romans just stood there like stones. And it scared the heck out of them, frankly, right? But when they got ready to leave, they would just stand and scream Mars at the top of their lungs to try to get his attention. It wasn't even uncommon for Roman soldiers to cover themselves in their enemy's blood and scream Mars after the fight, right? Get his attention. Look, this blood's for you. This blood's for you. So he was the god of war and violence, and he wasn't a happy, yippee, skippy god. But then Venus was the god of love, right? And what did some theories say? It was Venus covering Mars. Some say it was Jupiter, which was the Romans' favorite god. Jupiter, they would say, Optimus, the biggest and the best. That was the big line about, that's what you said. You said Jupiter, the biggest and the best. But you said it in Latin, and it sounded better. Whatever it was, who knows, right? There was a lot of theories, and based on what people could see in the sky, just depended on where you were. Where were these guys from? What we call Iraq now. Iraq, however you say it. And again, now don't let this freak you out. They weren't there the night Jesus was born. It would have taken them some time to get from Baghdad to Jerusalem, okay? But that's the night they saw him, okay? That's the night they saw the star and bugged out. And why? They're going to go find this new God. Magi weren't magicians in the way we think of magicians. They were stargazers. And really, honestly, could do some crazy advanced math. Side note, okay? Iraq, however you want to say it, if it wasn't for the Mongols, right, we'd probably all be speaking their language. They were so crazy advanced. Mathematics, art, science. they were really the only people in that region who could have given Rome a run. Well, no, that's not true. Well, anyway, but here, just know this. So about 1,100 years later, when the Mongols blew through Baghdad and killed over 1 million people in 3 days, right, with swords and bows. Think of how hard that is. They were efficient. That changed the history of the world forever, because at that point, Iraq was the peak of civilization. They could have been toe-to-toe with the Chinese. How's that? So anyway, these magi were from a very advanced culture that had great scientific and astronomical knowledge of the stars. Not the predicting the future crap, but like knowing the movement of the planets. They even knew Pluto in a sense. Yeah, they knew, anyway. So they saw that star and they started going there. Okay, now, how long would it have taken them? Some time. Okay, again, we always show them there shortly after or even the night of, but that's just for convenience of story. Okay, truly. Doesn't say so in the Bible. It's just how we interpret it. How are people doing? Are they bored?
Nope.
Are you people bored? Tell me the truth.
Nope.
Okay. All right, so 8 days after Jesus' birth, he's circumcised. That's the law. Okay, that's what you do. Cool little thing. I read about part of that ritual would involve the high priest, or the priest, doing the circumcision, would have offered Joseph money to buy the baby. It was just part of this little ritual they did. And that Joseph's answer would have been, not for all the money in the world. Right? Kind of cool stuff. They did that back then. So then 40 days after his birth, Jesus was presented at the temple in Jerusalem. And the Holy Family encountered Simeon and Anna, or Anna. Right? Where does that come from? If you go in your Bibles to Leviticus 12, 1 through 8, it breaks down all the stuff a good Jewish family would have needed to do once a squeaker was born. And when you see the phrase, a child who breaks the womb, what they simply mean is the firstborn. Okay? And they mean it like breaking open the womb. Yeah. All right. So now I want to read real quick. How are people doing?
Good.
Yeah, you guys all right? Let's look at Simeon and... it's pretty cool. Okay, so Simeon was promised by the Lord that he wouldn't die until he held salvation in his hands. And it says that when Simeon kind of grabbed Jesus to do the ceremony, he blessed God and said, "Lord, now let your servant go in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of his people Israel." Right? Isn't that beautiful? He's literally saying, let me die now, Lord. I got to hold him. The light of the world. But then he said to Mary, to me, oy, poor Mary, look, got goosebumps. Quote, "Woman, this child is set to be the rise and fall of many, a sign that is to be spoken against. A sword will pierce your heart, that the thoughts of many may be revealed." And, surprise, he was right. Right? Mary's heart was ripped out watching him be executed. He was the rise and the fall of many. Woo! That's Father Jim Rolfe. He often fills in, well, not often. Should I just let it? Okay. I was going to pick on him. He's like my little brother and I love him. Okay. So then, let me see, the prophetess Anna was there. And she lived with her husband and was a widow until she was 84. She was in the temple all day, every day, once her husband died. Right? I think you guys call them church ladies. Is that right? Yeah. She was the one who passed out the bulletins, picked up all the Kleenex in the temple,
Watered the plants.
and left the Kleenex. Let's just call it. But she saw Jesus and spoke of him to everyone, it says, who was looking for the salvation of Israel. What do we mean looking for the salvation of Israel? It depends who you're talking to, most people would have seen the salvation of Israel as get rid of the Romans. And you're going to see this is what gets Jesus in trouble when he's an adult. As people see what he can do, and they think he's going to militarily, politically liberate them. And as we learn, Jesus has very little interest in those things, which should say something to us, by the way. Sorry, no. Okay. So, after that, and this is where it gets a little hinky, okay? We know they returned to Nazareth because that's what it says in Luke 2:39. But it seems they then went to Bethlehem again at some point, and probably a few points, particularly again if Joseph owned land there. Okay. Also for religious observances, every year they would have had to pilgrimage to Bethlehem to go to the temple. So who knows? Bethlehem's only 5-6 miles from Jerusalem, which, I don't know, 3 miles an hour, 5 miles, just a few hours, right? But they would have had to go there for religious feasts. Maybe Joseph was checking on his property if he had it. But they would stay with people, okay? It's also possible that they didn't go back to Nazareth, but just stayed in Bethlehem for a few years, but it seems unlikely, okay? If they stayed in Bethlehem instead of going to Jerusalem, they lived with relatives. You see this face? And remember, guys, this isn't like houses Americans build where there are 900 bedrooms and bathrooms and like 4 kids or 1 kid. This is a square that you all stayed in and looked at each other. It wouldn't have been kosher, which is a weird word to use. It wouldn't have been normal for Joseph to rent a house because nobody's going to rent their house. Why would they leave their house? It wouldn't have been considered really a good thing to do to build his own house because A, it would have been expensive. B, you got family right here. We just think different, okay? But either way, between a year or 2 after the birth, and we lean toward 2 just because we look at how long of a trip that would have been, the Magi come. Okay? And where do they go? Are people bored? Okay. They go to the palace. Why? Because the sign in the sky said a God king. A God king. So let's go to the palace. And who do they find there? Oh, well, Herod. And if you know anything about Herod, you know he was probably, I think it's fair to say he's in the top 3 worst people in the Bible. Do you know about Herod? The man was bad news. He was brilliant. He built unbelievable and crazy things, but he was an awful human being. Actually, Caesar Augustus said a funny thing about Herod at one point, obviously not to Herod's face. In a letter he wrote somebody, and I can't remember what, he said, I would rather be Herod's pig than his son, because Herod killed all his boys. Right? And he was like, I'd rather be his pig than his son. Why? Because Herod was a Jew. He wasn't going to eat a pig, let alone kill it. He'll kill his kids. Isn't that right? Caesar Augustus wrote that in a letter to somebody. I just remember reading that and thinking, yeah, that's clever. What are we talking about? So they arrive and they go to the palace because a God king was born, and it had to be in the palace, right? You know, narrator, it was a barn. Herod sends them to Bethlehem, and they travel by night. They arrive there. Well, anyway, blah, blah, blah. They find Jesus, and they give him 3 things: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Okay? Gold, thank you. Right? Frankincense, woohoo! Myrrh, pardon? Right? Gold, because they saw him as an earthly king, and you give earthly kings gold. Frankincense was a type of incense used in worship, so they were acknowledging his divinity. What was myrrh? Myrrh was an awful thing to give a child. Have I ever talked about this? It's like giving... Sorry. It would literally be like showing up at someone's house and giving them, here's a coffin for your child. It's what you use to bury the dead. They were prophesying the bad end Okay, so think of it this way. If you've ever, and most churches skip verse 4 of We Three Kings, right? Why? Because verse 1 is We Three Kings of Orient are smoking a big Cuban cigar. One was loaded, it exploded. Now, okay, I'm just kidding. Does that go back to my song last week? Do you remember last week? We three kings of Orient are smoking a big Cuban cigar. One was loaded, it exploded. Now our hair's on fire. Do you know this? Oh, okay. So do you know verse 4 of the song? Seriously. No one's ever sang it to you, but look it up in your hymnal. Okay. Well, how's this? Verse 3, frankincense to offer have I, incense owns a deity nigh, prayer and praising, okay. Ever gazing, God is really tall, amen. Verse 4, ready? Myrrh is mine, its bitter perfume, breathes a life of gathering doom. Sorrowing, sighing, bleeding, dying, laid in a stone-cold tomb. Oh, star of wonder, isn't that nuts? Giving a kid myrrh was awful. It was, hey, your son's king, woo! Hey, your son's God, yay! He's gonna die. Wow. God doesn't play.
So they would have known that, the parents.
Yeah. I mean, again, this was the sword piercing Mary's heart. One of them, right? We say there's 7 sorrows of Mary. This was one of them. Oh my Lord. What the hey? It's an awful, awful gift to give. Okay. So the Magi are warned in a dream to return to their country by another route, which they do. Don't go back to Herod. Okay. After they leave, the angel comes to Joseph. I got to go fast, don't I? Holy cow, you guys have been messing around. And is told, go to Egypt, so they do. What you and I are supposed to do here is see a connection. Do you remember another Joseph who led the entire tribe of Israel? There were 70-some Jews alive in the world at that point. And where did he take them during the famine? To Egypt. Right? You making this connection? You're supposed to make a ton of these connections, right? Because Jesus' life parallels the Old Testament in a really groovy way. And if you ever want to freak out, look at a map of where the Ark of the Covenant went in the Old Testament, and it's exactly where Mary went, in the same order. The Ark of the Covenant, this city to this city to this city, Mary, this city to this city to this city. Why? She's the new Ark. She's holding inside of her God, right? I could go on and on. So Herod, when he realizes what happened, he does the math. Okay, how long would it take those guys to get here? So he figured 2 years, a year and a half. So he ordered the execution of every boy 2 years old or younger in that area. Isn't that something? It was a horror. But in an awful way, people were used to it. This is what happened. And you may remember, this is what the Egyptians did to the Jews in the time of Moses. This was, unfortunately, a moderately common practice for slaves or for occupied people. That every few years, and I'm so sorry that I say this, you would send your army in to kill all boys 2 to 3 years old or younger. Why? So that there's never enough males to give you trouble. These are the days people lived in. These are the days Jesus was born in. Okay? Herod realized, okay, so we went through all that. Herod the Great died sometime shortly after. Believe it or not, syphilis is what they believe happened. What they know is he, quote, rotted from the inside out. And the smell was apparently so awful, truly, that people would throw up in his presence. He rotted, which I'm okay with. Herod, as a side note, we'll get there in a minute. Okay, so once they're in Egypt and Joseph has another dream. Remember Joseph in the Old Testament with all the dreams? Joseph in this Testament with all the dreams. And what do the dreams say? Go back home. So he's told, return to Israel. They do so. This is Matthew 2 something. Once back in Israel, Joseph finds out that Herod Archelaus, that would be Herod's one surviving boy, is ruling in place of his dad. Joseph knows that kid's bad news, so he decides we won't go all the way. We'll just stay in Judea. Okay? And as a side note, Herod's son was such a disaster that Rome replaced him, which was not their practice at all. And guess who they replaced him with? They said, no more kings. Instead, you get a governor. Do you know this governor? It's the only Roman governor's name you all know. Pontius Pilate, who, like 30 years from now, is going to preside at Jesus' trial. How crazy is that? The Bible doesn't say that. We do with our historical records. So the family continues doing their pilgrimages to Jerusalem. When Jesus is 12 and they're there for Passover is when he stays in the temple. Do you remember this story? I'm so sorry. It's after 1. And actually, I think I'm kind of there. How are we? Did we do okay? Are there questions?
Did the Magi know that Jesus was destined to die?
Yes, I would assume. Why else would you give such an awful, awful, awful thing?
Yeah.
Great question. Did the Magi know Jesus was destined to die? They knew something. Because again, myrrh, I can't emphasize this enough. You would not ever give a child myrrh. It is despicable. It's here's a little coffin. I'm sorry, what a terrible thing. Anything else? Any other questions? No? Okay, I hope you found this helpful. It's just a chronological breakdown. Again, the Bible's not concerned with giving you the story in explicit detail of when, where, what. They just want to make sure you have all the information. And they do so with a tremendous amount of assumed knowledge because they never would have imagined that 2,000 years from now in a country that didn't exist, in a language that wasn't even invented yet, you and I would be reading about it. Never occurred to them. Crazy stuff, but it occurred to God. So we get it. All right, so this week, when you go to church, or if you can't go to church, when you're watching it and praying it through the internet, you remember this is your story. This is God coming to us at our worst moment, at our most dark, awful, violent time, and being born in a dirt poor, crappy situation in a country that was under foreign occupation. Why? Because every horror you can experience, he wanted to take into himself. Okay? When Adam and Eve disobeyed God, it changed humanity, right? We became capable of death. We became really good at sin. And so you have this human thing that the moment Jesus was conceived in Mary's womb, humans changed. And every time now that something happens to Jesus, it changes us. So like Peter Kraft put it this way, the first time baby Jesus cried, tears became holy. Why? Because that spiritual DNA shot through all of creation. Right? Adam's one sin messed us all up. Jesus' conception and birth started the healing. Okay, I could go on and on. Oh, I should have done this instead of talking about the timeline. I don't know. I just love this stuff.
It is good.
I wish we could get together tomorrow. Okay, so we won't because you should have a Christmas Eve where you don't have to deal with this. And I will see you next Wednesday. And do they want to go Thursday? Do you want to go next Thursday?
Yes,
they do. Okay. So next week we will go Wednesday and Thursday. On Friday, poop on all y'all. I'm going to watch football. I mean, I love you, but I don't love anybody that much. Just kidding. So next week, let's get together on Wednesday and maybe we'll talk about the incarnation. Okay? Let's do that. Incarnation is a type of powdered milk. Did any of you all drink? Did anyone get this?
I think they did.
Okay. All right. So I am so grateful to the Lord for all of you, and I hope you found this informative and helpful and maybe even inspiring, although I realize this was more informational. But think of all the connections between Joseph, the patriarch, namely Jacob's second youngest boy, right, and Joseph, our father, in a sense, right? Joseph and Mary, Egypt, the Promised Land, the slaughter of the infants, all of these things. Mary's travels, right? Dang. Like even, okay, stop. I could go on and on. What? You see something funny. Someone said something funny.
Yeah, it said, yes, do the milk talk.
Yes, we'll talk about carnation milk. No, we'll talk about incarnation because you could argue, I think I'm going to say this right, it's one of the 3 most important things Christians believe. Yes, I could argue that easily. I could even say one of 2. Right? That's why in the creed, we literally bow every time we even say it. Because this was the game changer. Oh, see, stop it. Okay, so will you help me remember next week we're going to talk about the incarnation. The best part, I won't even need to prepare. It's all jammed up there. All I got to do is put it in order.
Perfect.
Jesus help you people. For me on Christmas, I'm going to do the same homily. Right? I don't know what you think. I didn't know people didn't like that till last year. I thought all priests do this. I hope they do. So my homily on Christmas Eve is the same as my homily on Christmas. And we had a slight schedule change today. We got a lot of priests who got sick. So Father Lay, I'm serious. That dude is beautiful. He wants to serve. He doesn't want to be served. He wants to serve. And I could cry telling you this. I just told my priest support group, I said, I have felt alone for so long as a priest. Not physically alone, like kind of spiritually alone. That dude's all in. He's all in. So anyway, he and I are going to help out with the St. John's Davison community. And so that means on Christmas Eve, I'll have 4 and 6, and on Christmas 8 and 10. Whereas before, I think we just said 8.
Yep.
So we'll have 4 and 6 and midnight on Christmas Eve. Okay, and Father Lay's going to do midnight because I would rather be shot than do a midnight mass. I'd go to bed at 8 if you let me. Poor Dad. Dad is late to bed, early to rise. I'm early to bed, early to rise. But he tolerates it because he loves me. My daddy loves me. Okay, so is that Father Lay?
It is not. It's
Who's there?
It's Michelle.
Hey, Michelle! Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'll wrap this up with a prayer, and then I'll see you beautiful people on what?
Talk about overflow seating.
Oh, overflow seating for the 4 and 6. What we're going to do is this. We have our cameras now in the church. I'm doing a lot of this today. Have you noticed this, Michelle? I'm doing this a lot today. I don't know what it is. I do this for typing or piano. So which ones are we televising? Oh, we're doing that at any one we need. At any mass we need over Christmas Eve, we're going to have seating in the hall in case the church fills up, and we'll project the moneymaker into the hall, and then we'll consecrate enough hosts. This is consecrating. Enough hosts for everybody, and we'll just, a deacon or priest will carry them over and distribute in the hall.
Yes.
Okay? So if we find at the 4, it's like, oh no, we're full, we'll send people over to the hall and we will talk bad about you behind your back. Same for the 6. If we have overflow at midnight, I don't think I'll ever forgive you. I don't. I think I'll actually be mad. Not kidding. And then 8 and 10, I don't think we'll need it.
I don't think so.
Okay. So what a beautiful time with you. I'm sorry that Carrie went over for so long. It's her lack of discipline and her drinking problem that makes this difficult, but I bear her up because I'm strong and humble. So let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Jesus, our story is your story, and yours is ours. This is what family is. And as we remember your story, help us to take hope in it. That in the violence, in the darkness, and in the crazy, you're born. And it doesn't throw you off in the least. We cannot confound you. We cannot slow you down. And we're so grateful for that. All the stuff we're worried about, we give you now. All the people that we fret about, we give you now with expectant hearts. And what we're asking for, Lord, in this Christmas season is an astounding miracle. A healing of wounds. A soothing of our angers and fears. and an abject, defining trust and love of you. Because we do trust you, even when we're scared. And we love you, even in our sin. Amen. And may Almighty God bless all of you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Yeehaw! I will see you guys next Wednesday, when we talk about the incarnation, which is powdered milk.